17th, asking for a copy of what I said because I did not talk loud enough for her to hear me. I told her I would email her a copy of what I said, and I did so the next morning. I feel it was a waste of my time because very little of what I said was reported. I want to also apologize for the length of my presentation. I want to provide my thoughts, and I know if I wrote a letter to the editor of the Newcastle News, it would not be published. You will find out why shortly. I want to make it absolutely clear that I understand that as a board member, you have the right to vote yes, no, or abstain on the item being voted on. I will say it again. I understand that as a board member, you have the right to vote yes, no, or abstain on the item voted on. It is my opinion that it is responsibility of every board member to do what is necessary to become knowledgeable on the item that is being voted on. For example, I am not an expert on HVAC. When the board was considering upgrades to the HVAC system, I relied on the knowledge of other board members, our administration, and others who were involved with the project. How did I do that? I did it by attending meetings, reviewing everything that was presented, and asking questions that I had so that I could decide how I wanted to vote. I made a comment at our April 17th meeting that as board members, we need to make sure what we are telling people is accurate. I feel based on what I have read recently in the Newcastle News and on social media, I need to make the statement again. We as board members owe it not only to the taxpayers in the district, we owe it to the administration and each other to provide accurate information to everyone, including agencies that report the news. There were statements that were made that, in my opinion, are not accurate. I have not been made aware of any corrections made by the Newcastle News, so I assume what was quoted is what the board member being quoted said. If there were corrections, I apologize. A lot of the comments that were made, I feel, are inaccurate because of the board members being uninformed. I do not know if this is due to the board member missing committee of the whole meetings, regular board meetings, committee meetings that non-committee members can't attend, not sitting on any committees, not reading notes for minutes, or from not asking questions. All of the meetings I mentioned were open to the public. The Administration, Buildings, Grounds, Transportation Committee, and the Athletic Extracurricular Committee had meetings where the concession stand restroom project and the project for the baseball, softball fields were discussed. During these meetings, proposals were reviewed and plans discussed. I take the responsibility of being a board member very seriously. I am in my 13th year as a board member. If my memory is accurate, during my 13 years, I have missed 4 board meetings. One, my son was in Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. One was May 8th, 2018, when my dad was in Mercy Hospital in Pittsburgh after suffering a stroke on May 7th, which happens to be 6 years ago today. The other times I was sick. I know I've been blessed by God to have always had employment where I can make all board-related meetings. I understand that is not the case for all board members. I would like to mention that the schedule for the Committee of the Whole and regular board meetings is voted on in December for the following year. We should give every board member enough time to make sure their work schedule does not prevent them from attending the monthly scheduled meetings. I will state it again, it is responsibility of every board member to make sure they prepare for board members, board meetings, and understand what they are voting on. This means reviewing the minutes from the meetings they missed, review the minutes of committee meetings. Ask Dr. Houck, Mrs. Soldiers, myself, or the chairperson of the committee questions. The board members should be informed when they vote. There were a lot of comments on the field projects, timelines, and agenda items that appear to make the projects way over budget. I believe the comments were made because of a lack of understanding. For example, the dugouts and fencing for the baseball field. It was not part of the first phase of the project, but it was discussed in numerous meetings and explained numerous times that they would be needed once the work on the infield was complete. It is absurd to think that dugouts and fencing isn't needed for a baseball field. I am sure you are aware of the 3 recent articles and an editorial that were recently published in the Newcastle News. I am now going to read some of the statements that were made. I am not going to read every comment, and I am not going to discuss every comment. Former board member Ed Retor Jr., who was also the chairman of the Buildings, Grounds, and Transportation Committee, sent Pete Sirianni an email with a letter addressing the information in the articles published by the Newcastle News. He left numerous voicemails before he received a reply. The first reply was, "Mr. Retort, got your email. We typically allow up to 400 words for letters, and this comes in at 580. Mr. Retort sent another email and received this reply. "Our long-standing policy is 400 words for letters. Every story is fact-checked and verified. In the event of an error, a correction will be printed and the story updated online. I did not realize the Newcastle News was so overwhelmed with stories that they needed to limit the amount of words in the letter. I was and still am mystified by the every story is fact-checked and verified response. There is a who cares what you think we do section in the paper outlining the process for having a letter to the editor published. It states no more than 300 words. So what is it, 300 or 400? Now I'm going to address some of the comments made by Debbie Wachter. The cost of the fields has continuously increased without a budget because of unplanned and unforeseen drainage problems. My response is the wastewater management study and the resulting wastewater management project were planned, and there was only one drainage problem, and that's being taken care of by the engineer. The way the majority of school board members proceeded with piecemealing the project without definitive plans and costs. My response is the board decided what the initial phase of the softball and baseball field projects were going to include, with the knowledge that there would be additional costs for items related to the fields once the fields were completed, such as dugouts and fencing at the baseball field. Costs for a wheelchair accessible walkway, concession stand, and permanent restrooms are on hold for additional unknown costs. Not sure who told the reporter this. The only part of this statement that is accurate is the additional unknown costs. The administration and the Buildings and Grounds and Transportation Committee are researching all alternatives to the original design because of the extraordinarily high quotes that were received. Other inaccurate information. The article states there was $56,440 as an add-on to the cost of $60,000 for softball field dugouts, totaling $116,440. The article also states the largest new expense was $427,840 for stormwater management, added to the $31,340 the board had initially approved for. Both of these statements are inaccurate. I will now address some of the comments made by board members in the articles. Some of the comments appeared in numerous parts of the article. I will now comment on Mr. Baker's comments. He doesn't feel the board members who favor the projects are being transparent of all the facets of the project and cost. When the drainage costs jumped from $31,000 to more than $400,000, it seemed really off to me, Baker said. No one gave a thorough explanation for it. I'd have been satisfied at each meeting they needed an amount earmarked saying here's where we are in our plan and we're within our budget. I've already explained that these amounts are for two different parts of the project. It seemed off to me Mr. Baker did not ask Dr. Houck, Mrs. Soldridge, or me for an explanation. Did he ask for anything in a public meeting? Did he review meeting minutes? I do not know the answers except he never asked me and he never asked a question in a public meeting. My guess is he talked with board members who apparently still do not understand the difference. Now I'm going to comment on Mr. McBride's comments. Mr. McBride made a comment that I'm all for the field, but the board agreed to put $31,000 in the budget for water management drainage plans. Now it's costing $400,000. This has been explained numerous times during board meetings. The $31,000 was the cost to have the study done, and the $400,000 is for the work that had to be done. Mr. McBride commented that there are new additional costs every month. The board should have known about the $400,000 in the beginning. I'm for finishing the projects, but this craziness of adding on what wasn't budgeted is ridiculous. That's why you do a process. He claims some board members voted for it at any cost because their children were playing on the fields. He said, I want the kids to have nice fields too, but they're drunk on the notion their kids are going to play on these fancy fields. They aren't thinking that their kids will move on in a couple years, but they'll have to pay property taxes till the day they die. As I previously stated, there was a process that was discussed and followed. It does not matter to me if a board member's child would benefit from a baseball softball field, a new CNC machine in our tech ed department, or new sound and lighting in the auditorium. What matters to me is that when there is a need and the administration and board are approached, in this case by the softball and baseball coaches and the Buildings, Grounds, and Transportation Committee, we look at the need, determine if there is truly a need, research options, determine what the financial impact will be to the district. If after doing our due diligence, a decision on how to proceed can be made. We should not be making decisions based on who will benefit. Every board member has what they are passionate about. I am passionate about IT. Other board members are passionate about music, tech ed, VOAG, athletics. Should comments be made about me when I pursue improvements in IT and push the projects? I hope not. Moving on to Mr. Sully's comments. Sully said the board's 5-year plan of upgrading parking lots, the auditorium, and internet seemed to have been abandoned. Once the field expenses are paid, he said there won't be money to fix it. He said he's upset over delays in building in the concession stand and restroom. Sully also said, I want to remedy that, but now we have to wait to 2018 when we get rid of a debt service payment and we can swing around to do that. What did I say? Oh, I'm sorry, 2028. To do that. Sully said there should have been, that should have been the first project. Then phase 2 moving into doing the fields, and what would have happened, and that would have happened in 2028 when our debt service was done and it was freed up by the debt service money from the 2009 school renovation. I have absolutely no idea why Mr. Sully feels this way. The parking lots are still on the 5-year plan. The upgrading of the auditorium has not been abandoned. In fact, the lighting is done, and the administration is working with Mr. Zay and Mr. Adicott on the sound system to make sure they are getting what they asked for. As far as upgrading of the internet, once again, I have no idea what he's referring to. I sent Dr. Houck an email letting her know that I was going to email our technology coordinator, Teresa McConnell, to get her thoughts on Mr. Sully's comments dealing with the internet. Dr. Houck said she had already scheduled a meeting with Mrs. McConnell, and that Mrs. McConnell commented that when she read the comment, she had no idea what Mr. Sully was referring to. I have a copy of an email that Mrs. McConnell sent to Dr. Houck. It outlines the current status of the district's network and structure. I will not read everything in the email, except that according to Mrs. McConnell, all network equipment at the elementary and high school is up to date. The article states that Sully stepped down as board treasurer because of votes other board members took, such as when they retracted the contract from Sperduti. And I will get more on that in a little bit, but I will state it once again. The contract was never awarded. The vote was 4 yes and 5 no. Mr. Sully was a no vote. Now on to Mr. McKim's comments. His no votes were for methodical and financial reasons and wanted an expert drainage study, McKim said. Eventually, the board agreed to a drainage estimate by North Beaver Excavated, owned by Mike Sperduti. Then we were told they were taking all the items off the agenda, included a rescinding contract for Sperduti, and why, I don't know. This is something else that has been discussed numerous times, and it was in a slide in Dr. Houck's presentation on April 17th, and recorded in the board minutes from June 13th, 2023. The agenda item that this was a line item for was denied by a 4 yes to 5 no vote, and Mr. McKim was a no vote. I do not understand why it has been stated that the contract was rescinded. The agenda item did not pass. In response to Mr. McKim's statement that he wanted an expert drainage study, the study was a requirement of the state and North Beaver Township based on NPDES permitting requirements. It wasn't done because Mr. McKim wanted it done. It had to be done. The study was done by Wallace and Pancher for a cost of $31,000. McKim said this all started with a 9-0 vote to accept the proposal for the concession stand and restroom and an initial cost to get the grading and drainage done. McKim said, now we haven't even started that concession stand and restroom. He said they jumped right over the baseball and softball field. The whole concept bothers me. It's very poor business. If Mr. McKim is referring to an agenda for a design-build contract with Matt Hansen of ICAM Architecture for the preparation of a concession stand design and the development of bid documents, he is correct. It was not a proposal for the concession stand and restroom area. When the cost for the concession stand restroom projects came in, they were considerably higher than what was expected. The board decided to research other alternatives. Not sure how this would correlate to very poor business. In fact, I would call it being fiscally responsible, a term that I've heard numerous times being the reason for some no votes. McKim said recently there have been concerns about spending and that there appears to be manipulation to favor individuals and special interests. McKim said these questions from the community have caused them to have tremendous mistrust in our board, and to be honest, they raise questions of motive to me. While I understand it to be legal and not legal to not use the bidding process, it can cause distrust from outsiders looking in. McKim asked why North Beaver Contracting initially submitted a low bid for excavating and drainage, then the contract was rescinded 6 days later at a special meeting with not all board members present. The article continues, the board instead hired a company, Phil Turf, a Target Sports Company, which later came back with a change order for $420,000 for the drainage costs, he said. I will say it again, a contract cannot be rescinded that was never awarded because the vote for the project did not pass by 4 yes to 5 no, and Mr. McKim and Mr. Sully were 2 of the no votes. He also asked why special meetings were called about the project to accommodate only select board members. I find this comment comical. It is hard enough to get perfect attendance at a monthly committee of the whole and regular board meetings. For the time period of December 7th, 2021 through November 30th, 2023, we have had perfect attendance 22 out of 48 meetings. For the time period 12/5/2023 to April 17th, 2024, we've had perfect attendance 3 out of 9, and as of tonight, I can make that 3 out of 10. I've reviewed the minutes from the special meetings that were held on June 19th, November 1st, and November 30th. The June 19th meeting was not attended by Mr. McKim and Mr. Sully. Every agenda item that was voted on passed by a 7 yes to 0 no vote. The November 21st meeting was not attended by Mr. Lake. There were 3 items that were voted on. The first was to reject all bids for the stadium concession restroom facility. This passed with an 8 yes to 0 no vote. The second item was the motion to table the agenda item dealing with the change orders for the stormwater reservoir. Motion to table failed with a 4 yes, 4 no, and 1 absent. The third item was approval for the change order for the stormwater reservoirs and removing the softball and fencing, softball, baseball, and backstopping. This also failed with a 4 yes, 4 no, and 1 absence. After the meeting on November 21st, I received email requests from board members, Mrs. McGreal, Mr. Pezzuolo, and Mr. Retort to have a special meeting. I checked our policy and also reached out to Dr. Houck and Attorney Lucas. Our board policy section 000, local board procedures, titled Meetings, Code 006, outlines the requirements for a special meeting. The meeting was scheduled for November 30th. The only agenda item to be considered was the change order from Phil Turf for the stormwater reservoir improvements. The agenda item passed with a 5 yes, 0 no, and 4 absent. Board members McBride, McKim, Patton, and Sully were absent. McKim also commented, why was there not an official cost going into the project? It has created a blank check. He continues, the district also looked bad hiring a board member's relative as one of the contractors for the project. The process that was followed has been explained numerous times. As far as the comment about hiring a board member's relative, again, this has been explained numerous times. Our solicitor, Attorney Lucas, explained when a board member can vote on an agenda item dealing with family members. It was explained numerous times why Mr. Pezzuolo was allowed to vote. It was explained numerous times the proper procedure was followed for obtaining quotes. It was explained numerous times GP Construction had the lowest quote. Gary Pezzuolo is a Mohawk graduate, resident, and business owner in the district. The only thing that should matter is GP Construction provided the lowest quote. I have heard numerous times how we feel the need to be fiscally responsible. I wonder why that doesn't seem to be the matter in this case. Mr. McKim also commented, I have been proud to be part of Mohawk since its formation in 1958, McKim said. I am still proud of our Mohawk district and its accomplishments, but I'm not proud to be on the board during these dark and questionable days. My only response is if you're not proud to be on the board, you have the option of resigning. The term fiscal responsibility was mentioned by board members numerous times. The girls softball scoreboard was approved by a 9-0 vote on May 10th, 2022. The only current board member that was not on the board at that time is Mr. Baker. It was not necessary to revote on the scoreboard because it was already approved. The current cost of $19,000 was higher, so Dr. Huff and I thought it was the correct thing to do. The board voted on the scoreboard at the higher cost, and it was approved by a 6-3 vote. Board members Baker, McKim, and Sully were no votes. The next item on the agenda was accepting $10,000 in donations toward the scoreboard. The motion passed by a 6-3 vote. Once again, board members Baker, McKim, and Sully were the no votes. How is it fiscally responsible to vote no on $10,000 in donations? The net effect of the $10,000 in donations made the cost of the scoreboard for the district $9,000, which was cheaper than the original $10,000 that was approved by a 9-0 vote on May 10th, 2022. I will say it again. How is voting no being fiscally responsible? During our regular board meetings, there is an agenda item to pay the bills as listed. Maybe board members do not review the list of bills that we vote on every month. Every month, this agenda item is approved unanimously by the board members in attendance. There have been bills that have been approved dealing with the projects that board members voted no on. I question why the board members who voted no on projects vote yes to pay the bills associated with these projects. If I was a no vote, I would ask for a motion and a second to pull the bills associated with the projects and have them as a separate agenda item. If there was a motion and a second, a roll call vote would be taken, and if the motion passed, those bills would be voted on separately, and the no votes could vote no to pay the bills. If I had voted no on a project, I would not be voting yes to pay the bills associated with it. We have been told numerous times that residents do not want to come to the board directly. They would rather talk to a board member. As I stated at our last meeting, I would prefer to have them at the meeting because I want to make sure they are told what they are told is accurate. I think I have proven tonight that they have not been given accurate information. I am also confused why they would not want to address the board directly. During my time on the board, we have had to hold meetings in the cafeteria and auditorium for the following: dress code, teacher furloughs, football coach, COVID, football hazing, and these fill projects. If there were so many residents concerned with these topics that we had to move our meetings, why do residents now feel they can't address the administration and the board directly? I ask myself how many residents are actually upset. I've never had a resident complain to me about the field projects. I have had residents thank me. I have overheard people from other districts who are at the fields for games talking about how nice the fields are and that they wish they had them. I do not care how a board member votes as long as they are not being persuaded by another board member or community members. I care that board members base their vote on the facts and what is in the best interest for the district as a whole. I am now going to briefly discuss the Newcastle News and reporting the irresponsible and biased reporting they have done. I would expect the local newspaper to be unbiased in their reporting. The reporting of Debbie Wachter and the editorial by Pete Cerani was strictly one-sided. Debbie Wachter did not call Ms. McGreal, Mr. Patton, Mr. Late, or Mr. Pezzuolo to find out why they voted yes. She asked me for a copy of what I said at our April 17th meeting, and she only used a small portion of it. She never called me to ask me any questions. I also asked myself, why did she ask board members why they voted no on agenda items dealing with field projects, but failed to ask them to respond to the question I asked, why they voted no on an anonymous donation to the scoreboard, but voted yes to anonymous donations to unexpected shipping costs for the musical and for special education purposes. As I previously stated, Mr. Retort was told by the editor, Pete Cerani, that every story is fact-checked and verified. I am not sure who fact-checked and verified Debbie Wachter's story or Pete Cerani's editorial, but I do know they did not do a very good job. Being uninformed, not prepared, or being ignorant to the facts should not be used as an excuse. When we were discussing all the projects, I was against doing them, all of them, at once. After many discussions, I decided to do some due diligence of my own. I reviewed the district's general fund balance history, monthly financial reports, debt, and annual budgets for the last 5 years. It was after doing all that I was confident that all these projects could be undertaken. I also want to remind everybody that when the district's auditor presented their annual findings, they told us once again the district is in good financial shape. I have heard the same finding year after year. Excuse me. I was going to ask Mrs. Soldridge to discuss the district's overall financial health, the general fund balance since 2008, the capital expenditures that have been made since 2008 that are over $35 million, the purpose of the general fund, the purpose of the capital fund, the balance in Mohawk's general fund and capital fund compared to other school districts in the county, and the amount of debt that Mohawk has compared to other districts, but I decided against it. This information that has been discussed in numerous meetings and provided to all board members, and they either do not understand it or they understand it and decide to continue not to provide accurate information to the residents of Mohawk. I am going to mention one final time that it is the responsibility of every board member to be prepared for meetings. Attendance at meetings is very important. In fact, we have a board policy, section 000, local board procedures titled membership code 004, that addresses the possible consequences of poor attendance. Attendance is something I track, and it will be discussed at a later time. I am truly hopeful that we can move on from this. I feel that Dr. Houck and Mrs. Soldridge have spent enough time and energy providing information that should answer all the questions once and for all. How fiscally responsible is it to keep having them spend time dealing with this? As board members, we need to learn to leave our differences and how we feel personally about each other outside of the boardroom. When we convene any meeting, our goal should be to do what is in the best interest of our students, staff, administration, and residents of the district. I hope we can do that. I will close with 2 more thoughts. It is my opinion, based on everything I presented this evening and everything that Dr. Houck and Mrs. Soldridge have presented, the board members that made the inaccurate comments that appeared in the Newcastle News owe at the very least a public apology to the Mohawk community, and truthfully one to the rest of the board. I was going to tell Mrs. Wachter if she wanted a copy of what I said tonight, to please schedule a face-to-face meeting with Dr. Houck, Mr. Retort, Mr. Pezzuolo, and Mrs. George, and myself, so that we can answer questions that she has. This will hopefully prevent inaccurate information from being published again. Thank you for your patience and attention this evening. Any other board member like to make a comment?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Mr. Pezzuolo?
Every single board member at every single school goes through training by the Pennsylvania School Board Association before they're on the board. And part of that training is, you can vote yes, you can vote no, you can abstain, whatever it is. But when the vote is over, you back the vote. And every single one of you knows that is part of the training. You don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with it, but part of the training by the Pennsylvania School Board Association is you back the majority vote. It's very obvious this board isn't doing that.
I would like to make a comment. I think the main root of this problem, from what I see, and I kind of ride the middle because I could see where the concerns came from too, and I think the root of it all was that we, at that initial meeting where we approved the softball but rescinded the baseball and then went back on all that, it was done very quickly, and I think it was too rushed for people to really absorb all the accurate information. I know I had some confusion myself there, and so I think as we move forward, we need to take our time, not make any decisions very quickly, because that was a quick change, if you all remember how that meeting went, right? Okay, and it was very confusing as to what the numbers were. And then when you take a look, and whether it's fact or not, because I've had this feedback too, you may not have gotten it, but I did. When the public sees, oh, we added this and we added that, the fencing is, if they're not involved with that program, they don't quite understand that. You know, so that's where that's coming from. Also, if you wanna compare it to like the expenses we spend on the music program, the expenses we spend on the music program is very minuscule compared to this project at the moment. And that is curricular, this is extracurricular. I'm not gonna deny that because I was an athlete too, and I know how important it is for our kids. It really, really is, but I think that we need to, although everything was done and it may all be legal, there was just too much confusion with the way it was handled going into it. And, you know, that creates a lot of frustration, and confusion. So I think we need to take more due diligence as board members when it comes to that. I'm gonna leave it at that for now.
I appreciate that, and you're right, we all need to take, do more due diligence on everything. As far as what we spend in other areas, I don't remember in my 13 years having somebody come, whether it be music, the tech ed, whatever, and they had a real need, we did it. I mean, I'm thinking it was you and me that told the band directors when we saw instruments that were probably
Yeah.
used when we were in band, don't be afraid to ask us.
Right.
But I appreciate you.
Also, it is a fine line, the financial responsibility that we bear and servicing our kids. And to try to walk that line and do it with a balance is very difficult. And some of us see one side more than others, I think, but we need to balance that.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but I'll be brief. Just, this is me personally, there's no divide in my mind of, like, athletics, the music department, the arts, like, we have a student body that we are responsible for making sure they have a good education, a good, academic career, a good athletic career, a good musical career. That is all together. I know I didn't draw any kind of line and pick a side of anything. I'm on the kids' side. That's why I am on this board. It doesn't matter if they're athletes, if they're not, if they're in the band. I will never, ever vote no on something out of spite or anger that I have toward an adult that can benefit a child. If we can afford something, and I'll use the music department as an example because I love the arts, if we can build a whole new auditorium or like some kind of outside pavilion and we decide that we have the capital fund for that and it's there, my vote is yes. So the divide needs to be gone because it's been apparent that that's what's happening. And that's all. I know we've been talking a lot, so.
Well, I think the big thing too was that huge 425-some thousand change order with the sewer water. That just really was so much more that I
Keep
can't
in mind,
remember.
it was,
I can't remember what the estimate was that Ed gave us at the
It-
meeting. We
Like
didn't have a
150.
cost.
It was like 150 and they were
Yeah.
just guessing.
Right.
Because they knew it needed done, but no one knew the price.
Right, and see, that's where we made the error. We should have waited for that price if it was possible.
But that wasn't just for the
And that
fields,
needed done for everything,
Everything,
and
right.
that needed done for
Right.
any
Right.
kind of
The
ground
concessions,
disturbance.
the whole bit.
anything on that side of the driveway,
Right.
no matter what we did, it
Right.
needed done.
Right.
If
But
that were
was
in main
the-
grass, what you have needed is wastewater, stormwater. If it had been grass,
It disturbed more than 1 acre.
No matter how you disturb it, if you disturb
Right,
more than
yeah,
1 acre.
That's the NPDS, yeah, that's their rule.
anyone else? Okay, at this time, before I ask for a motion and a second for adjournment, I'd like to announce we're going into executive session to discuss personnel. We will not be coming out to vote on anything. So at this time, can I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you for your attendance this evening.